and we have varied topics from natural wellness, anti-aging, and you're hearing it from an expert. I teach in the Academy of Anti-Aging Environmental Advancement in Medicine, and I'm an MD. I'm trained also in background in marine bacteriology, oceanography, nuclear physics, chemistry, advanced biochemistry, and of course, because of the experience and range of medical legal issues, we deal with those as well, such as things like the smart meters. And I love to have wonderful guests on and ask good questions. And this gentleman is brilliant. David John Oates, he is the founder of Reverse Speech, and his discovery is probably one of the most important, I would think, dealing with information and the truth in the 21st century. Welcome to the program, David John Oates. Are you there? I don't hear his voice, so... Okay, we don't have him yet. We're still working on it. Okay, reverse speech is really interesting, and here's a couple of the questions that I asked David off air. He did a recent show over on the Rents Network, which I thought was pretty remarkable, where he did reverse speech of a number of things going back to the JFK assassination. He had someone did remote viewing, and he also had someone else, Jim Mars, who I know very well, who's been on the program many times, who is a historian and analysis of the conspiracies tied back to the assassination of John F. Kennedy. And they all came up with exactly the same conclusions, which is pretty interesting. Today, what we're going to talk about is reverse speech of, say, politicians like Ted Cruz and Marco Rubio and the Trump, the Donald. We're going to talk about, is there a neurological basis to reverse speech? And is there also a way of us, how can I say this, explaining in other ways? Let me see if I can put him up on our speaker, because we're somehow having connection problems. And if I can add... David John Oates to this as well, because do we have him now? Okay, very good. Okay, welcome to the program, David John Oates.
Thank you for having me, sir. I appreciate it.
Listen, I want to first off really congratulate you on your discovery, and you've made a lot of remarkable things that you've discovered. You've trained a lot of people. You actually have a foundation. What's your website address?
The main one is reversespeech.com. That's all in one word, reversespeech.com. Yeah.
REVERSESPEECH.com. Okay.
Correct.
Yes. So the first thing that I want to talk about, I have a background as a neuroscientist, and we talked about this off air. You have an interesting theory about the underlying reason why reverse speech occurs. Can you give us that theory?
I've got several theories about why it occurs. My main theory is the human mind is designed to be, the human body is designed to tell the truth, and when we speak mistruths, the brain will correct those truths either through body language, or I use reverse speech. It's an unconscious form of communication. It's the way the unconscious communicates, and communicates our real intentions, where consciously we are often unable to do so. So,
right.
So that's part of its function.
That kind of makes that's a good theory. What I like to think is a neuroanatomical thing. If, for example, we tend to think of the brain as left and right brain. Left brain being linear, the ability to create, if you want to call a string of a priori assumptions, so and so, i.e., maybe the source of lying is the left brain. And the right brain, and by the way, it doesn't have to be in that brain. Apparently, in women, you can have left and right brain functions of both sides. They tend to find more lateralization in men. So if they have a stroke, they tend to have different effects depending if it's left or right side. Right. So there's a possibility that there's a anatomic factor, neuroanatomic. And I would raise this question: is there someone has a traumatic injury or a stroke or a tumor? Does it affect this reverse speech? Have you ever seen any evidence of that?
Oh, I haven't. I've worked, the closest I've gotten to is I've worked with dementia patients, with Alzheimer's, and found remarkably clear reversals on them.
Right.
But no, I've done no work with stroke patients or brain injury patients. No.
Now, I'm just going to give some information. This is what I call Tier 1 science. You're not going to hear this anywhere else on Earth. The first thing is every living tissue has a way of recording its experiences, whether it's a paramecium or a eukaryotic cell. And it records it through the changes in cell membrane potentials, which creates electrical currents and what we call biophotons. The second stage of that is what's called microtubules. They're actually recorded. They're almost like we call a solid-state memory system, molecular memory. So it's a molecular memory system, and it's non-local. So that's why when you can take a section of brain out of a salamander and actually transplant it to another salamander, you've put it through a training paradigm, and it'll remember the learned activity. So in other words, non-local memory is recorded as microtubules. And then the third stage is what's called epigenetic changes in DNA. In fact, DNA is constantly being changed during your life. People think their genes are fixed when they're born. That's not true. You even have programs in your DNA to write new DNA code while you're alive. And you write new epigenetic code as well. So if you, for example, have a very bad diet, you can cause your children up to 3 generations to have an increased risk of diabetes, for example.
Oh, right.
They discovered, for example, in mice, and this is an interesting thing, and this is U.S. Department of Agriculture, because their research is often 30 to 40 years ahead of medical doctors, the USDA. They found out that if you make one generation of mice zinc deficient, it takes 3 to 6 generations to return the zinc metalloenzymes to normal. Now, epigenetics is biophotons, and when we're going to have on the program the biology belief with Bruce Lipton. And I've done research on what's called biophotons and so on. My first presentation was a paper in 1982 after I worked with a PhD engineer and I had a device from Europe working on what's called the biophysics of biological systems. And I presented a theory with quantum energy transfer equations of how these things happen. So I think what you're saying is the biological systems are truthful and lies are basically the top level that our cortex can manufacture as a quote, maybe as a presumed survival mechanism to lie. As a joke, I revised this with my wife the other night because she said, "Well, you got to revise that level." I call it 4 levels of consciousness. I call aware and prepared, basically truthful. Second is we call scared and paralyzed, basically.
Okay.
Under stress we call fight or flight. Aware and prepared is more parasympathetic. And then, of course, the next level is what we call Pollyannas, basically not really aware that there's danger or opportunity. And then finally I call pet rock. Basically, they're basically a smile, but they really don't know what's going on. And they don't know even should they respond. Now, reverse speech is really cool because I would imagine you can use it in corporations, you can use it in personal relationships, you can use it in analyzing the real intent of politicians and corporate heads. And then when you're making business deals, I'm sure your services can be extremely valuable in untangling what's really going on.
Sure.
So tell us some examples of that, because I know when we listen to some of the reverse speech, and I've listened to you, and I've had you on before, but I've listened to your various shows over, especially at Rents. It actually could be like an SNL skit. Some of the things you show in reverse speech are crack up. I mean, it really is like, and some of the things are also shocking. We have Mr. Trump, for example, and I've diagnosed him because I've been in practice now almost 40 years. And Trump basically has a touch of what I call Asperger's syndrome, okay? He has and of course this comes back from his father. He's always thought to be like King, Trump. So he's got a bit of a narcissistic ego, and he's got pictures of Apollo and all kinds of things all over his apartments in New York and so on. And he's a very driven man, super high intelligence. As you say, he has a huge brain. Just kidding. But the thing is, he actually tells the truth. And people, because he doesn't necessarily filter things beforehand, he can tick people off. Like, I call like a junior high student saying, this girl's pretty, this one's not, and he's treating people differently, which is why he upsets women. But he really doesn't hate women. He just doesn't have a filter to his mouth. But he does tell the truth. And you've demonstrated that actually the only one, the candidate that I know that actually is telling the truth, even if he can irritate people, is Donald Trump. And you're the one that's done that. You even convinced me this guy's real, even if he has a few rough edges. Want to hear some of that when we come back? David John Oates, ReverseSpeech.com. ReverseSpeech.com. David, I'm sure you've got some really funny and enlightening reversals of some politicians. Maybe Ted Cruz, we call, as the Donald says, Lion Ted, or we can hear Donald himself and some of his gaffes. And of course, I think Melania, who is actually pretty level-headed, she's actually pretty smart. She's an architect and has her own line of jewelry and so on. So although she's a supermodel, she has a super brain as well, not just huge like Donald. And his daughter too also has tried to discipline do not retweet. So if you understand that he has a touch of Asperger's and a little bit of narcissistic, but I think the man is mainly super competent and extremely driven, but he has a touch of Asperger's, which means he's not going to have the social graces to shut up when he should. But he tells the truth as he knows it.
Ted Cruz?
No, I'm not talking about Ted Cruz. He's lying Ted. I'm talking about the Donald. I think Ted Cruz is.
Donald.
I don't think Ted is capable of telling the truth. I think.
No, I don't think he is either. I was about to take issue with you. I thought you were talking about Ted Cruz.
No. I totally agree. I think Ted Cruz, and the thing is, you don't have to actually conjecture about this. You can just read about his loans, his this, his that, his wife Heidi. They shouldn't have been retweeting about her looks. So talk about the fact that she's a daughter of darkness, writing the North American Free Trade Agreement and working as a CFR and a Goldman Sachs girl on loan, taking a leave period. They shouldn't have talked about looks. He should have talked about substantive matters and policy. And I think instead of retweeting, if he actually stopped and took a few deep breaths and maybe meditated, maybe called his wife to say, do you think I should retweet? And she'd say, Donald, did I tell you I'm going to take away your Twitter account? That's what I think should have happened. She should have de-Twittered him. How's that?
Yeah. Here's a couple of reversals on Ted Cruz I just pulled up. Here's one. I'll play it forwards.
People ask for their support. The reason is simple. Because when I look my girls in the eyes 10, 20 years from now, I am not going to tell them we could have stood up and saved this country.
And here he says, you molested a con man.
You molested a con man.
Oh my.
Molested a con man.
Speaks for itself, doesn't it?
It does indeed. It does indeed. Now, wow. I mean, the thing is that the mind itself, and this is an interesting thing too that people should understand on the spirit level. If you look at high-level masonry, there's a thing called hoodwinking. And you have to telegraph what you're going to do to the profane, others, the animals, the people who don't understand this. Otherwise, you can't actually do it. That's why you'll see published in videos or documents like the Global World Watch Institute and Agenda 2030 and the Georgia Guidestones and everything telegraphed, sometimes in architecture, sometimes in written, sometimes even in plays or ballet. You'll see them telegraphing the truth of what they're going to do, because that's part of, you have to tell the truth so that when you make someone a victim and they don't understand, it proves that they're justifiably a victim. And I think it ties in with your ability to, which is a very remarkable discovery you have of reverse speech. So any other reversals on Lion Ted or on the Donald?
Okay, I'll do one more on Ted, then we'll look at Donald. So here's Ted.
I think most people know exactly what New York values are.
I am from New York.
You're from New York, so you might not.
And here he says, I'll be destroying our freedom.
I'll be destroying our freedom.
Oh, my.
How about that? That's
wow.
Doesn't speak well for him at all, does it?
No, it does indeed. In fact, my son will be coming on and talking about this a bit tomorrow as a expert in symbology and other aspects. But Ted Cruz makes my skin crawl. He's up there with Hillary Clinton, who's what I call the highest level female Mason in the Western world, and the very highly intelligent, extremely evil. In fact, the most evil person I've ever met on earth is Hillary Clinton.
Yeah, I would agree with her. Her reversals are really quite disastrous. Here's Hillary talking about guns.
I know here a young African-American man was fatally shot.
And here she says, I am the crime.
I am the crime.
Yeah.
I am the crime.
Now,
I am crime.
So that's Hillary.
Right. Now, let me just divert just for a second so people understand this. I'm a scientist and a doctor. But because I had a near-death experience, basically 8.5, and I died at birth and was resuscitated after 26 minutes, I have what's called second sight. Now, it's not an average second sight. When I went Hillary Clinton and Bill Clinton at Dakota Ridge High School, because I took care of the first kid shot in Columbine, I met Bill Clinton, and he's the kind of guy you could go out fishing with, and he'd crack jokes, and you'd have a couple beers, but you'd be afraid to turn your back on him, because he could take a leak in your boots, shake your hand, tell you a joke, and stab you in the back at the same time. Now, when I met Hillary, as I approached her, I felt like something cold, like, you entered into a haunted building, and I saw a blank-faced, pantsuited female, but as I approached her, I touched her hand, which was like touching a wet mackerel, which is very cold. I could see, not just kind of in my mind's eye, but I have a second sight to see the spiritual realm. I saw a 16'8" Draco reptilian monstrosity, and it looked at me and was terrified. Now, I'm not making this up, okay, because I have the second sight ability. I don't need to go into an altered state or take ayahuasca and all this other garbage. What people need to understand is that I discerned, and I've taken care of supermax facility prisoners where they're chained at the neck, arms, and legs, and the two guards have guns aimed at the chest and head of the patient while I'm examining them, and she's 1,000 times more evil. This woman, I said, 2 years ago, I prayed and I said, God, show me who this woman is. I saw a little girl going in a peacoat to a dark building in New England, and she was by her family because they're the Rodhams. They've been wizards or warlocks for many centuries. They took her to a sex magic ritual and human sacrifice where she drank blood and ate flesh. So they shattered her psyche just like they shattered the psyche of Mr. Barack Obama. They're not a normal human being. They're a person I call clay and iron. The clay, which is I call the wet-wired flesh, being avatared by the iron of a transdimensional entity, or we call a spiritual pathogen, if you want to call it, would be another term for it. So we're not talking about a normal person. She's very intelligent. She's unbelievably evil. And so is Ted Cruz. This man, if you actually listen to what he says and actually fact-check his things, he's scary. I mean, he's creepy beyond. And so both Hillary and him are creepy. They're scary, scary, scary. Okay, now, some people just have a kind of recoil in their spirit and say, well, Ted Cruz, he makes me creep. But when you have my gift, you actually see it. You actually know it in your soul. You say, oh my gosh, this is like you recoil. So when I see, for example, the Donald, I see a man who really loves America, really knows how to be successful, doesn't have the skill sets to actually shut up like what I call a middle schooler when he shouldn't say something inappropriate, say to girls because they're either homely or whatever. But I don't see him as evil. He's not a racist. He's not a misogynist against women. Not all these things that they're saying on the left is just like, are you crazy? He wants black people to have jobs. He wants the poor to have insurance and not have to have copays. He's actually said that. He wants a pathway to eventually where we can have health care for everybody at a reasonable cost. But it has to be doable. Like Bernie Sanders is a clown. He has no idea how to pay for any of these things. He has no ideas how to implement his international policies or anything. So Bernie has the heart in the right place, but he has no brain. He's like the straw. He's like the in the Wizard of Oz, the straw man. If I only had a brain. He doesn't have one. Sorry, he's not getting an Oz either, or the District of Criminals. Not going to happen.
Yep.
So when we come back, we'll hear more reversals, and we'll take your calls too. And David, if you can stay over if you want to in hour 2, we can even do more stuff. And as the show goes on.
No, I can't do hour 2. Sorry, I got a client.
That's it. The website for David John Oates is Reverse Speech, REVERSE speech.com. David, what you've done, you've trained a lot of people, and tell us about over the period of time what you've done, and the kind of, if you want to call it, teaching sessions you have, and what books and materials and so on.
Yeah, I have regular training classes which I do online. I'm in Australia, and most of my students are in America and England, so we get together once every 2 weeks online for 3 hours where I teach the basics. Lot to learn in learning reverse speech. You've got to learn how to recognize reversal, how to distinguish between what is imagination and what is real, and then you've got to learn to interpret the reversal. What do they mean in context? So there's a fair bit of there's a fair bit to learn. So the classes go for six months, 2 classes a month.
Right. So what you're saying is that there's an art and a science to it. You need to learn both, or you're not going to be good at it. Just like learning how to play piano or whatever. There's an art and science. This is a very valuable skill. Can you give us, without names of corporations or people, the kinds of things you've kind of untied the Gordian knots of business deals, relationships, other things, or had other people that you've trained that have done that? Because I think this is an extremely valuable skill. Like even what's going on in the elections, if people want to choose the right person, they need to untie the Gordian knots, because the media, I call the medium, is constantly lying to us. I call it part of the liocracy, where most of the media, radio and television, is just plain garbage. They're trying to lie to our brain and make us make bad decisions, not just personally, but corporately as an organism. What kind of examples can you give of solutions you've given people or corporations to say, make this deal, don't make that deal, this is why this relationship is not working, etc.?
Yeah, I actually have got quite a large clientele of business people, and they'll contact me before they've got to make an important business decision. Reversals will tell us whether the decision they're making is the right one or the wrong one.
Exactly.
Let me give you a classic example. Let me play some examples here.
Sure,
We
okay.
have a business example.
When people sign up for our company as a partner, they need to be looked after throughout the year, throughout the years and years to come. Basically, someone needs to look after them. You see,
And this one says, see a market gain today.
your market gain today.
Wow.
Yeah, nice and clear.
That's very clear, yeah.
Yeah, so he's this guy. The decision will affect him in the market. Okay.
Yeah, that's really interesting. That's really interesting.
Yeah, and here's another one. She's talking. Let's run this one.
But I have no capital. I have to be able to make some capital somewhere. And flipping at the moment seems the most obvious way of making some capital. So we buy below market value, do the place up, sell.
And here the reversal says, work the patterns, we can't fail.
Work the patterns, we can't fail.
Wow.
Got that?
So in other words, both the forward and the reverse speech are congruent, is what you're saying.
Right. And so that tells us that in this case, this person's making the right decision. Now, sometimes you will get contradictory reversals, where the reversals come back and say, oh, no, this is a very bad decision. Let me see if I can see one offhand. Oh, I can see a couple, but they use four-letter words. I can't use that.
Yeah, can, yeah.
No. Here's one. Okay, let's run this one.
It is a black artwork with foil, very big, very heavy, beautiful work, abstract.
Wow.
And I want to try and sell it at Sotheby's because it didn't sell last year. I gave it to them for them to sell. It never sold.
And this one says, see the loss they tell us now.
See the loss that they left now.
And again.
See the loss that they left now.
So she's talking about selling an art piece, and the reversals
Right.
are saying, no, you will make a loss out of this. Okay,
Wow.
It's not going to
Yeah.
sell for the price you want.
That's
however,
really
in
interesting.
Yeah, I get a lot of clients, business clients.
Now, I have on my phone, I actually have your reverse speech app on my phone, which is
okay.
really inexpensive. And can people kind of do a number of clips and then contact yourself or one of your trained people, and they'll do an analysis and say, well, these clips, we think this is what is going on, because they can describe the current, say, business deal or relationship. For example, if you have a family or a husband, wife, or whatever, that are having issues, you can often tease out what's really going on underneath that's causing the ongoing conflict, because people on a conscious level may not know what's happening, but their subconscious, or I call their superconscious, does.
Right. Yeah, that's right. And that's the information you're tapping into. The superconscious will know whether a situation is going to work or not work.
Now, I'm going to say something bold here. As I like to say, something bold that make people think. And that's why I call people not asking questions, but asking them. I think that there's a portion of all of us, collectively, we as human beings are, in a sense, and this is why it talks about in the Bible, because I'm a Christian, right, but more of a messianic, cosmic Christian, is that we are, in a sense, the female counterpart to God, and collectively, not just individually. And all sentient beings in the universe are the female side of God, because we have God children. We also have a level of what we call eternal knowledge. And the title for God basically is King of Wisdom. That's why it says through the Bible with David and so on, you can only sin against God. You can't sin against man or things. Even if you do evil, you can't sin except against God, which basically sin is to not shema. And the Hebrew word means not hear and do. And I think there's a portion of all of us that's basically that seed stock that basically says, you know what the truth is if you seek it, it's in you already. But you decide to do the follower of Satan, which is basically to decide for yourself what is good or evil. That's the original sin. It's the only sin. The only sin is to not seek the truth, which is already in you, because it's basically your soul, which is not eternal, your soul, which is mortal, and the Spirit of God, which is eternal. When it's fused together, you are, quote, saved. You're actually seeking truth, which is going to prosper you physically, financially, emotionally, relationally. And I think that there's a supernatural aspect to what's going on here that's really important, because our civilization isn't going to survive technically, population-wise or environmentally, unless we have what I call a higher level of spirit wisdom. And these, by the way, this spirit wisdom transcends the mortal, what I call real lies going on, or public religions of most of the things on earth, because much of the religions have perverted the truth of what our nature is and what the Creator God is, and what our role is, not only now, but in the universe 10,000, a million years from now. And the problem with our current civilization is we live on we're constantly in a sea of lies. And what you do is you actually, to pull it apart so you make better personal decisions, business decisions, maybe health decisions. Because a lot of people don't realize what's killing them. They don't realize what's ruining their business, what's ruining their relationship. Because on one level, whether it's their personal or family experiences, they have a string of lies they believe, I call it their mental blocks, and they can't get out of it because it's embedded into their current, gestalt of what they think reality is.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, yes. And sometimes reverse speech can give people quite a nasty shock.
Well, they need a nasty shock. That's the nasty shock needs to happen. That's why, for example, when you take out Donald Trump, he's the nasty shock, and on the Democratic side, even though he doesn't have solutions, Bernie Sanders is a nasty shock because technically, collectively, we're in what's called, biblically, in the birth pangs, which means our civilization is going through a transition. We are about to collectively become a new type of creature. And that new creature is going to have to be one where we transcend our technology so we don't get destroyed by it, or artificial intelligence, where we can start becoming a galactic civilization and spreading across the galaxy at sublight and above light speeds, where we interact with advanced cultures from other worlds and other types of beings that are human and non-human. And when we start to understand the nature of what we are in our Creator God transcends our mundane ideas of religion on earth. That's the problem. And if we don't proceed, that's why what you're providing is an amazing tool to find the truth and to find that it's in everybody. And they're even in their own speech. The truth is in them.
Yes.
Interesting, eh? The truth is in you already. You just don't know it's there.
Yep.
And welcome back. And we have some Donald on the menu now. Again, reversespeech.com. You can get these training sessions. You can get the phone app. And really, this is an amazing tool for business, for personal life, and for even discerning what's going to happen in the near future. I think you could theoretically get enough reversals. You could do a kind of a global scape, if you want to call it a truthscape, of what's going to happen in the near future, either the nation or the world or a financial community, if you had enough reversals.
Yes.
So what about Donald? What do you have there?
Well, he's pretty much congruent. Here, let's run one of him forwards here.
Absolutely. I mean, I don't notice Swedish people knocking down the World Trade Center. This certainly is. And I came out very strongly against the mosque being built virtually across the street.
And so did I. You and I were on the same page. Okay.
And here he says backwards, America now.
Wow.
So his loyalties lie with America, and that's what he wants to see. He wants to promote America, and he's the only candidate to use the word America in his reversals. So, here's another one. He's telling America to wake up.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And he says, America, wake up.
America.
Right. So his reverse speech is telling the spirits of the people listening. The people need to understand this. When you have a really on-fire evangelist, or a person like Trump, who's a political evangelist, telling the truth, he's speaking spirit words, I call it, in his reverse speech, to the souls and the consciousness, the superconsciousness of his listeners.
Right.
That's what he's doing. People need to understand their soul hears these words, and they know it's the truth.
Yeah, right. Right, absolutely right. Yes, and I mean, Donald Trump is very congruent. Here's one where he expresses his confidence. Here's the forwards.
And so, should the Republicans shut down the government rather than fund Planned Parenthood?
Well, I don't know what's going to happen. I guess they're doing it right now as we speak. Again, I'm in my office in New York, and I guess as we speak, they're going for a vote of some kind.
And here he says, I am the man.
I am the man.
But I'm the man. I'm the one you can trust. I'm the one, I'm the one who leads us out of trouble. And here's another one where he says the same thing. Here we go.
For 10 hours, but it's unfair to the viewers. It's too long. You know, the Democratic debate, if you look at it, that was 2 hours and it was too long. Everybody was bored at the end. They want to make this much longer than that.
And here he says, I was the one and I believe it.
I was doing it. I believe it. I was doing it. I believe it.
Great personal confidence there. He's the one to solve that problem.
This is something I want people to grasp, because in our culture there's a thing called political correctness. There's also a thing called intellectual correctness, which means if you have somebody who has a superior intellectual talent, whether it's business or music or writing, there's a great deal of what I call jealousy to say we're all created equal. We're not. None of us are created equal. Some people can jump higher, some people can punch faster, some people can discern things in pictures and do artwork. Like you have an amazing talent to discern reverse speech. And so I see, although he has a narcissistic characteristic, I see Donald Trump as a person who's super competent, but I don't see them as arrogant. At all. In fact, I don't even see a shred of arrogance in him. I see a man who has a bit of narcissism, but his primary thing is he's incredibly competent because he's driven, and he does have a big heart to tell people. And that means black, white, whatever. The people that I find most distressed about, and this grieves me, are black people where black young men are 55% unemployed. People that are Hispanic, that are American citizens, are losing jobs to illegal Hispanics. We have terrorism coming in, and believe me, people like Obama and Ted Cruz would love, or Hillary would love to have terrorism so they can have a bipartisan domestic security bill and take away all our rights. And if you don't show your papers, please, I mean you don't show your cell phone with a tracker chip in it, you're not going to be able to go anywhere. You're not going to go in the building, a public building or a federal building. You're not going to be able to go in a shopping center. Everything is going to go to hell in a handcart if this happens. And we may not even have an election if something happens with the so-called terrorists coming in, because there's literally hundreds of these cells already ready to go on the order. Now, the thing that restrains Muslims is 95 to 98% of them are decent people because they don't believe the Hadith and the Shura and the other horrible things within Islam. They want to get away from it. Okay? But what happens is they've been beat down and so passive, just like the Germans before the rise of Nazi Germany, that they're not willing to fight significantly against the horror of the 1% or 2% that are radicalizing their mosques and threatening them with putting them on a kill list, so killing their daughter if they go to college or whatever, or slashing their tires or poisoning them if they dare speak out against things being spoken of in the mosque. And that's the real problem. It's not a matter of just immigration. It's a matter of we have a cancer metastasizing in the body, not just of America, but nations all over the world. And the globalists are in collaboration with them, thinking somehow they're going to control the cancer. They're crazy. They're crazy. And the only one who's speaking the truth about this, because Islam is very dangerous. And we're going to have Bill Morner back on the program. Radical. It was called politicalislam.com, his website. He's a former Tennessee State University professor. And what's going on is reverse speech shows that Donald gets it. Now, the wall is only a partial solution. The $2 trillion of drugs being brought into this country are brought in by the CIA, FBI, and the Department of Injustice, okay, with like Fast and Furious. And I don't pull punches on this show, as you probably know. I'm like what I call an informational pathologist. I'm going to get my bone saw out and my scalpels and lasers, and I'm going to cut right down to the bone marrow to find out what the heck's happening. Including the superconscious and these other issues. Because what's really going on is the world is literally on life support. And if we don't make proper decisions based on wisdom, our nation will go down the toilet and the world will end. Because we'll have a thermonuclear, biological, and chemical war that'll make life on this little third rock from the Sol, the yellow dwarf star, cease to exist. And it'll happen relatively soon if we don't get wisdom.
Yeah, right.
So any more reversals?
Oh, what? You want some more on Trump?
We have 3 more minutes, yep.
Okay, here's Trump talking about Hillary.
When he gave up that email thing, he said, "Here, Hillary." And you know what? That was orchestrated by the Democratic Party.
And he says, "Hillary, let's see this email."
Hillary, this email. Hillary, this email.
So he's talking about the email controversies, and he uses Hillary's name in reverse, which is interesting, I think. So,
wow. Now, there's 3 issues about Hillary's emails. The first is some of that information will get agents killed. Number 2, her primary aide is a daughter of the senior woman that developed the Muslim Brotherhood. in Saudi Arabia, Ummah Abedin. Okay, people don't know this about taqiyya and maruna and lying. They'll even go against the rules of the Quran just so that they can actually capture people. That's why they have Hiraj and all these lying things, which is taqiyya and maruna. I know my family on my mother's side were Maronite Christians descended from Moses, and I can tell you that people don't understand how dangerous Islam is. And the moderate Muslims who want to just live a decent life, they're in some of the greatest danger, because what I expect is after major terrorism, many of these decent and normal and passive people are going to end up in civil detention camps. I don't want to see that. But I see that's where it's going, because Americans will not put up with being blown up in shopping centers or airports. They're not going to put up with biological or radiological weapons being released. I worked personally with the FBI and CDC under Reserve Admiral Hughes in 97 on Operation Top Off and Dark Werner, so I know firsthand with presidential level clearance exactly what's going on, and it's scary as hell. I only tell people a portion of what I know because they couldn't handle it, to be honest with you.
Right.
So I think that what you're doing is really amazing. I want to get you back. We want to do more reversals as we see this election cycle go. If America doesn't turn right and put in Trump, I call it God's Trump card, America's finished. And if America's finished, it's a doorstop to the globalism where without a border, you don't have a nation. If you don't have an economy based on building things, not just high tech, it's layers. You don't let all your industries like Nabisco and Ford and so on build plants all over the world. It's fine to help those other economies. But if you export all your manufacturing base, you can't, number one, have a military. You can't have many of your blue-collar type people have jobs. Right. And if you expand we call it the welfare state to the point where your corporations can't possibly make a profit in your company, in your country, like Bernie Sanders wants to do, you don't have an economy to pay for anything.
Right.
You have what I call a gruel class and no money to even pay for the gruel. So thank you, David John Oates. You've done an amazing job.
All right, sir. We'll speak to you again, okay?
We got to bring you back on, reversespeech.com, and then check over in some of the shows you've done over in Rents, because you've done some neat stuff over there. That latest show I heard about was pretty amazing, so that was posted, I think.
Yeah, you got to listen to JFK. We tell you exactly what happened and the truth involved.
Yeah, it was a coup by the CIA under George Bush Sr. and LBJ and others in the cabal. It's part of the reason why the Israelis have nukes now, because of what they did and how it ended our incest democracy.